Good afternoon. As I said last week, we are officially in uncharted territory as far as our study of all the men and women of the Bible goes, because when we did this a couple years ago, we made it to Bernice, who we talked about last week, and now it's only the dark, uncharted waters from here. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're going to look at, Benjamin and a woman named Bernice, or something like that. Both of whom, there's not a whole lot said, but there is quite a bit that we can learn. And I've said it before, I like characters who are not very prominent in their role. In fact, these two have a much more prominent role than some characters who may just be named, and that's all we know of them. Benjamin, you might be surprised to hear somebody say that Benjamin is not a very prominent character, but he's really not. What we know about him, first of all, his name, Benjamin, was given by his father, which means son of the right hand. And his mother gave him a different name, if you remember, Benoni, which means son of sorrow. And who Benjamin was, he's the youngest son of Jacob, and eventual favored son of Jacob, unfortunately, who would eventually become the founder of a tribal family known as the tribe of Benjamin. And just a few things we know about him, including the ones I just said. Youngest son of Jacob. He was the second son of Rachel, Joseph being the first. Sadly, she died giving birth to him, to Benjamin. He was held very dear to Jacob and protected. He was prevented from going to Egypt with his brothers to get grain. Finally, he was framed by Joseph and forced to. He had to go to Egypt, and Judah saved him from punishment. We can't get into the whole story, but this is just sort of the little tidbits of the story. And he finally received 5 times more than his other brothers because Joseph loved him so much. He was worried about him, obviously, because of the way they treated him when he was younger. And so he was kind of testing his brothers. It fascinated me. I was trying to look and see and make sure it was correct, and I couldn't find anything. So I was shocked to suddenly, I don't know what made me think of it, but Benjamin, there's not a single quote of Benjamin in the whole narrative of the late chapters of Genesis. I expected there to be, not to say that all of the brothers have, all these lines or quotes, but Benjamin never said, even as prominent as he was as far as Jacob was concerned and important as he was to Jacob, he never says anything. If you find somewhere that Benjamin said something, let me know, and I'll never say that again. But I couldn't find anything, which I found fascinating. Benjamin's almost just kind of thrown around by them, like he doesn't even have a voice. Jacob says, no, Benjamin's staying with me, and the brothers say, well, no, he said he got to come with us, or else he's going to, we'll be in big trouble. And so then they take Benjamin with him and there, and then Joseph puts the cup in his bag. But all through this, Benjamin never says anything. He may have, but in the scriptures, it doesn't say anything. But one thing that he is naturally known for, just like the other sons of Jacob for the most part, was the tribe that bears his name. He was the origin, I guess, if you want the progenitor, however you want to put it, of the tribe of Benjamin. And Jacob said something about Benjamin on his deathbed. He was the man beloved of Jehovah, is what we're calling him, what our book calls him. He was. This is what Jacob said in those prophecies about him, about all the sons. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf In the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. Well, why is that important? Benjamin was very small. Not the man, but the tribe was small. He was the youngest brother, so he was small in that sense. But the tribe of Benjamin was one of the small. It was the smallest. In fact, it's referred to in 1 Samuel 9:21 as the least of all the tribes of Israel. And yet, Benjamin had a big impact on the people of Israel. Benjamin was a kind of seemed to be one of the tribes that you would have wanted to have on your resume, or would have been one of those things that you could get credit for just for having been of the tribe of Benjamin. Some pretty notable people came from the tribe of Benjamin. Anybody know who some of them were? Okay, Saul. The other Saul. Both. I was going to say which one when you said Saul, but it would have been a trick question because both of them. Ehud, one of the judges, the second judge. So, being of the tribe of Benjamin, somebody might say, well, yeah, they're the smallest of the tribe. They're small, insignificant. Not true. Small and insignificant are not the same thing. They're not necessarily going together. Think about Jesus himself. He wasn't of the tribe of Benjamin, but think of where he came from. Born in Bethlehem, very lowly place, very lowly circumstances. He was raised in Nazareth, lowly, humble. Everything about his upbringing, and he was from humble everything, really. And yet, look at his impact. Look at what he was, what he accomplished. So, coming from a small place or a small tribe had no effect on the impact that this man and the tribe that came after him could have. Deuteronomy 33 says, oh, by the way, Jerusalem was given to Benjamin. Should have put a map up here. Add this to the list of times when I didn't put a map when I should have. Jerusalem was in Benjamin. Just a little bit of the land, but technically wasn't in Judah. It was in Benjamin. But in Deuteronomy 33:12, it said, between Benjamin's shoulders, the God of Israel caused his name to dwell. And then he said, in Benjamin, he covered Israel all the day long. So Benjamin, as a tribe, coming from the man, Benjamin, had a role to play in God's scheme and was very much loved by God, even though they were small. The high God surrounds him all day long. Maybe that was true of the other tribes, but it wasn't said of the other tribes. So there's something to that.
Is that why the tribe of Benjamin stuck with Judah?
Probably. Maybe. I mean, they were connected geographically, but I think it was Simeon at one time that was actually in Judah, literally, like it was like an island, not an island, like land mass, but just a circle in the middle of the big. Judah was a big area. Benjamin was the one right above that, so they were almost kind of like a package deal. And at any rate, yeah, Benjamin was the only one that I think Simeon just kind of phased out, and Benjamin was the only one that stayed true with Judah. And Jerusalem probably would have had a big part in that and their relationship together. Psalm 68:27 says, there is Benjamin, the least of them, in the lead. The least of them, and yet in the lead. Ravenous wolf, as Jacob said. It's pretty much all we could say about Benjamin. And that's the lesson too. You don't have to be great in size to be great in impact. I think congregations like us should be comforted and encouraged by that, because sometimes we may get discouraged. We don't have the numbers, we don't have the money, we don't have the whatever. But that's not to say we don't have the ability to make a difference and have an impact. Just look at Benjamin, least of the 12 tribes, and had a great impact. Bravest, most beloved. Some of the most influential people came from Benjamin. God said some pretty encouraging things about Benjamin. And right along with that, you don't have to be great in number to be great in God's love, mercy, and grace. So, same lesson pretty much. Small congregations, again, encouragement from that. We can be faithful. God doesn't expect us to have 400 members. He does expect us to be faithful. Mm-hmm.
Wasn't it the men of the tribe of Benjamin that abused the concubine? And they had to get the smallest tribe because they had to figure out how to give them wives because they all swore they wouldn't give their daughters to them.
Yeah, a blemish, I guess. They weren't perfect. And they had blemishes, unfortunate little blips in their history, I guess, like.
That's why they were smaller, I think.
I think even in number, they were smaller, but that definitely did limit.
Yeah, that would have made it, probably would have affected it to some extent. But small, the least of all the tribes, and yet lots of great things were done from people that came from that. And God spoke very highly of the tribe of Benjamin, even though they were the least. Okay, flipping over quite a bit. Bernice. That's just the, I don't know what you'd call it, not necessarily the English pronunciation, I don't know the American pronunciation, because her name is actually Bernice, is how you say it. And you can kind of see that from the spelling in the Greek. Her name means victorious. If you look at the last 4 letters of her name in Greek, it's probably a word that you're familiar with. These letters. Ever heard it? Nike, as we call, again, there's the English pronunciation. Nike means victory. On purpose. That's why that's why it's called that. Victory. Wear Nikes, you'll win, is the idea. Pretty smart. Not always the case, but pretty smart for marketing. But that's where the victory part of her name comes. Carrying off victory or just victorious. Who was this woman? Do you remember? Well, here's who she was. When she was in company with her brother Agrippa, she visited Festus, who was then the procurator of Judea, who had inherited a prisoner named Apostle Paul. And they were both interested in hearing him whenever they came to see Festus, and he told them about this prisoner that Felix had, left for him, and they wanted to hear him. She was not a good woman, we'll say. Well, just to make things clear, she was not a good woman. She had a bad track record. Okay, first of all, she was the eldest daughter of one of the great tormentors of the early church, named Herod Agrippa I. Acts 12. After her first marriage, she married her uncle, another of the Herods. Remember, we've talked about the family of Herod. It's not the kind of family you want to be a part of. Can't even imagine the family reunions they must have had. Horrible family. And then after she was widowed, she was suspected of having incestuous relations with her brother, Agrippa II. So, among other things, it's also been said that she, with her sister Drusilla, who's also referenced, 2 of the most corrupt and shameless women in Roman history, of their time at least. That's the kind of woman we're dealing with here. But even a woman like her, she sort of stumbled upon the gospel. She didn't go there for the gospel, but she came in contact with the gospel this wicked woman who allegedly was living this incestuous and abominable lifestyle. She comes to Caesarea and hears about Paul. And Agrippa, she sort of fades to the background at this point, but it seems to be that she was still there. Agrippa says, I'd like to hear this guy. I'll listen to him. I'll hear what he has to say. And what we read is, so they come in the next day, as Luke describes, with great pomp. Great word. You can picture it, what it probably looked like. The clothing, the manner of the way they entered, just self-glorification, even in a situation like this. Paul comes in, and he gives his defense. He tells them what's going on, why he's in prison, but he goes beyond that. And he says, after he tells about his conversion, he says, I wasn't disobedient to the heavenly vision. Let me find my verse here. 19. But declared first to those in Damascus, then in Jerusalem, and throughout all the region of Judea, and also to the Gentiles, that they should repent and turn to God, performing deeds in keeping with their repentance. Now, he's telling him what he was saying to everybody else. But by doing that, he's also telling them himself. He's telling them the same thing by the very nature of saying, this is what I've been teaching. Now he said it, so now he's taught them that they need to repent and turn to God, performing deeds in keeping with their repentance, just like everybody else needs to do. Whether they listen to it, we'll get a little bit of a glimpse. And that's why the Jews tried to kill me, he says. That's why I'm here, because I was teaching that, and the Jews tried to kill me for that. To this day, he says, I've had the help that comes from God, and so I stand here testifying both to small and great, saying nothing but what the prophets and Moses said would come to pass. That the Christ must suffer, and that by being the first to rise from the dead, he would proclaim light both to our people and to the Gentiles. There's the message. Agrippa II and his sister, / apparently lover, listening. And Festus kind of ruins it a little bit by speaking up and mocking him. You're out of your mind. You've been doing a little too much learning. It's driven you crazy. You're talking like a madman. Paul said, no, I'm not. I'm not out of my mind. I'm speaking true and rational words. Crazy people don't speak in rational words. You may find what I'm saying fascinating, but it's not crazy. I'm not acting like an irrational person. I'm speaking true and rational words. That's all I'm doing. But then he pinpoints it to Agrippa and maybe Bernice as well. He says, the king knows about these things, and to him I speak boldly. For I'm persuaded that none of these things has escaped his notice, for this hasn't been done in a corner. And then he pinpoints him again and says, King Agrippa, you believe in the prophets. Remember, she's presumably right here. They both entered the room with great pomp. She's sitting right there. You believe the prophets? I know you believe. And this is the infamous statement that I guess we probably already looked at when we looked at Agrippa. In a short time, you would make me a Christian? I wish that we had some inkling of what she was thinking. What's going on with her? Is she joining in this? And by the way, in the context, I think Agrippa probably was mocking as well. Festus just openly mocked. And Agrippa probably was doing that too. Like, it's a joke. He may have been moved a little bit, but he pushed it off by making a joke. Like, boy, you think you're going to make me a Christian this fast, huh? And that was the end of it. Except for Paul saying, whether short or long, I would to God that not only you, but also everybody would become such as I am. Christian. Become a Christian. Not a prisoner, but a Christian. I don't know how that couldn't move somebody. What's he got to gain, right? What would he gain if Agrippa obeyed the gospel? He's not going to get anything out of it. Paul, that is. But it says the king arose, the governor and Bernice, and that was the end of it. Just walked out. Unmoved, which is what I named her. The book called her the woman who was incestuous or something like that conduct, but I thought this fit the scripture, the scriptural account of her much better. She was a woman who was unmoved by the gospel. And there's plenty to learn from people who are unmoved by the gospel. It's sad. It's unfortunate. But she's one of many. Lessons we can learn from her? Here's one. Don't marry your uncle. Don't know if you've ever been tempted to do that, but don't. Just not a good idea in a lot of ways. That's one thing we can learn from her. Maybe another lesson we can learn is help your sister be a better woman than letting each other, be like a force of abomination wherever you go. Yep.
Did she have a choice in this matter?
Marrying her uncle?
Who she married, did she have a choice?
I don't know.
Because,
Well, everybody has a choice, but
well, when you look at 6 situations, families tend to repeat the same stuff.
yeah.
And
I'm
so-
not sure if that would have been the norm, even for the family of Herod. They were technically considered Jews. They were very loose, kind of the Jews didn't view them as Jews, but they were technically of, of Israel in some connection. That's how the Romans viewed them, and that's why they put the Herods in power, because they felt like, okay, you're one of them, so you would be a good person to put in power. I don't think I'd have to check. I'm not sure if incest was the norm, even for them. So it seems there may have been something else going on there.
I just didn't know if she, because obviously Esther didn't have a choice. But she didn't.
Well, she did, but, right?
A choice of marriage.
Yes, she could have said no.
Esther,
Yeah. Everybody can say no.
she would have died.
Okay. Yeah, we agree there. She would have died.
She was in that position for a reason.
Yeah, I know. But we're talking about Bernice. Stop trying to skip to the east. We won't be there for another 4 or 5 years, okay?
I'm just saying, in that culture, I didn't know.
I don't know what the circumstances were around her second marriage. In fact, it wasn't even clear what the circumstances were of her first marriage, because I initially was going to assume that after she became a widow, she married her uncle, but that wasn't even clear. So I don't know if her first husband died or what. She just, at some point after she was, after her marriage to whoever the first man was, she ended up marrying her uncle, who presumably was much older than her and died soon after. And then she goes with her brother. Sounds like a pattern to me. And there's probably something to that accusation. Probably wasn't just a rumor. Dean, do you have something? Yeah, it was back then, yeah. Yeah, one thing we know is that marrying within your own family was not explicitly condemned until the law of Moses. So before the law of Moses, the farther you go back, it was not only not wrong, it was necessary. Who do you think Seth's wife, for instance, was? Who could she have been? Cain, for that matter. When we read about his wife all of a sudden, and that's always been a big question: is Cain went to Nod and found a wife? Where'd she come from? How were there people at Nod? If he was, no, it doesn't say that. Now I'm getting into the seas, But anyway, he took his wife to Nod, is what it says. Who do you think she was? She had to have been his sister. There's no other person she could have been. So back then it was different. By this time, for sure, it was abomination. But that didn't stop them. And that's kind of the way it is with many people, with many things. Maybe not incest, but just because it's abomination doesn't mean they're not going to do it. Another lesson we can take from this, as leaders of families or any members of families. You see, as soon as the name Herod gets attached to you, we might think already they got no chance. You're the daughter of Agrippa the First. You got no chance. You're bound to be wicked. How can she help it? God should show her mercy because she didn't choose her parentage. So it's just built into her. She's got to be evil. That's not true. That's not the case. Is there a hereditary element in the procreative process? Nope. I don't think so. Not unavoidable, not beyond your control. We read about, in the Bible, good men who had wicked sons, don't we? Like I listed some. Eli. Now, Eli was lacking, but yeah, Samuel. They went and told Samuel, your sons. Isn't that they told Samuel that? Or was it that Eli? I think they did both. Both of them. I forgot about Samuel. I mixed those two together. Samuel had bad sons. David had bad sons. We already talked about two of them, Amnon and Absalom. Nothing like their father, at least in spirit and in heart. Hezekiah, great king. One of the at least good and better kings. Maybe not to Josiah's level. But guess who his son was? Manasseh. And you know who Manasseh was? Arguably the wickedest of all their kings, and he reigned for 55 years. So they went from Hezekiah to Manasseh. How can that happen? Because that's just the way it is sometimes. But the other way too, we read about evil men who had good sons. Ahaz was an evil king, and his son was Hezekiah. So it kind of went, evil, and he had a good son, and then he had a bad son, an evil son. But Hezekiah was a good man. Ammon and Josiah. Ammon, wicked king. Josiah, said to be the greatest king that they ever had. And we can read about how great he was in 2 Kings 21 and 22. So, leaders of family, evil is not hereditary. It can be taught, no doubt about it, but that's different than that's actually the total opposite of hereditary. Yep.
I think the Proverbs, it says that train up a child in the way they should go. And then it doesn't mean it always happens, but it does mean that if you teach and keep example, that hopefully they'll return when they.
Yeah. Or, yeah, go ahead. They're going to learn from people everywhere. Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's not to mention, you never know what your words will be like. For example, say of a friend or something like that. Even though your kid may not take to it, the friend just might.
Yeah, maybe. That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's a responsibility. It's not hereditary, but she didn't have to be wicked the way she was just because her dad was and her granddad was and all that, and her sister was. She could have been influenced, or I guess the point I'm making is her father and mother, whoever she was, I don't remember, could have been an influence for good on her. Apparently they weren't. We kind of know they weren't. Dean, do you have something?
Well, I'll tell you,
Yeah.
I mean, it's something, and even today, we have people that, some of the children turn out good, and some bad. I mean, and you try to raise them both the same, but yet, that, even though you do try to raise children the same, they don't always turn out the same.
Yeah. So in those cases, those sad cases, just like Hezekiah and Manasseh, at some point Manasseh was led to the path that he went. Instead of the path that his father went, he went in the other direction, because at some point he was influenced to go in that direction. And that's the same with our children and grandchildren. And that's why it's such a responsibility we have to make sure that our leadership and our influence is powerful enough to overcome all the forces that are going to try to pull them away as they grow and mature.
The beauty of what we're talking about is what the mercy of Christ was all about. In other words, the whole point of Christianity is you can change, you control. I mean, we have to influence everybody around us, but we still have the ultimate responsibility for choice.
Yep. You can change if you want to. That's the key. Wanting to is, in a way, is the first step. And for some people, it's literally the first step. I want to change my life, and that's what leads them to hear the gospel and find out how they can change their life. But that's the key, is no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, you can do it too. You can change. And she could have also.
Look at what Paul said right at the end. I would that you were as I am. Not about these chains on my arms, but what we were talking about this morning. The heaven that's prepared and the terror that's prepared. There are two. And so those choices have grave effects.
Yeah.
Where you spend your
It is the ultimate choice. And thirdly, hearing the gospel is both a privilege but also a responsibility. Once you hear the gospel, you are now in a position where you have a choice to make. And every single person who's ever heard the gospel has made this choice. You either choose to accept it or reject it. We don't get the details of how this ended up, but it seems to me that what we do have is indication that it didn't go anywhere, because all Agrippa, his takeaway from it was all political. It was just or judicial. It was nothing spiritual, nothing religious. He said, this man hasn't done anything to deserve death or imprisonment. If he hadn't appealed to Caesar, we could have let him go right now. He could have already been let go. So nothing about what Paul said, nothing about what he taught, nothing about, maybe he did think about it more. Maybe she thought about it more. Who knows? But it seems she was unmoved, even by a powerful message like that. And no, it's not hereditary, but again, there is something to the environment that she was brought up in, made it a lot harder for her to be impacted. And if her parents had been more righteous and been better examples to lead her to righteousness, then maybe this encounter with Paul would have changed her life. It's not that it's the parents' fault. Everybody answers for their own rejection or acceptance of the gospel. But there is something to that there's something that we can do to help people, not just our kids either, but people that we know. Do whatever we can to help them, to facilitate their acceptance of the word when they hear it. Dean, do you have something else? Yeah. Yeah.
They have a choice to make, and that choice is theirs. It's just like with homosexuality. You're not born with it. You're not born with alcohol. You're not born with sin. Not having to anything. So, I mean, it's your decision that you have to make.
Yeah.
It's your
Yep. If your parents were, if your mother particularly, I guess, especially, was an alcoholic, or even if your father was, it may make you more likely to be tempted, and I guess what they call it, predisposed, but it's still your choice to partake in that. And that's true of all sin. You know, we are, you know, kind of little versions of our parents in a way, that we came from them. So what the things that they dealt with may be input to us, but the choice to do those things is ours. We have the choice. And the same goes for other things that I might not be tempted to do. I have a choice to not do those things too. But even the things that I am tempted to do, I have a choice. She had a choice too. And it's a shame. It's her fault as much as her parents, but it's sad because they could have made a difference. And we can make a difference too. Or at least die trying.